The Holy Bible, the books of Moses. God wrote the Bible so people would know about the world He created and about Him. He wants us to know about our history, our future, why we are here, and how to live together in love, now and forever. Each of the 66 books of the Bible teaches us about ourselves and about God. The Bible is divided into two parts, the Old Testament and the New Testament. In the Old Testament, the first book is the book of Genesis. Genesis means beginnings. Here, God tells about the ancient times, starting with how He created the world.
The creation, Genesis 1 and 2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God did this in 6 days. Everything God made, including the earth, looked grown up as soon as God spoke it into being. Day 1. At first the earth was without form and dark, and the Spirit of God moved over the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw the light was good. He separated the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness night. And there was evening and morning, the first day. Day 2. Then God said, "Let there be space between the waters below and the waters above." And God called the space sky. And there was evening and morning, the second day. Day 3. God said, "Let the waters be gathered into one place, and let the dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters seas. Then God spoke, and the grass, the flowers, the trees, and all living plants came forth from the earth, each bearing seed or fruit after its kind. This means that only apple trees come from apple seeds, and only sunflowers come from sunflower seeds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and morning, the third day. Day 4. And God said, "Let there be lights in space to divide the day from the night, and to be for seasons, for days, and for years." And God set the sun to rule the day, and the moon to rule the night. He made the stars also. And there was evening and morning, the fourth day. Day 5. Then God said, "Let the great sea creatures appear, and every living thing with which the waters abound, and let the birds fly above the earth." He created them all, each after their own kind. And God blessed them. He told them to have lots and lots of babies, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply." And there was evening and morning, the fifth day. Day 6. God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures after their own kind, and creeping things and beasts of the earth after their own kind." And it was so. God created the cattle, tame animals such as sheep and dogs, and wild beasts, wild animals such as lions and dinosaurs, each after their own kind. God looked at all He had made and saw that it was very good. But God wasn't finished. He had created all these things just to make a beautiful home for His final creation, people. So on day 6, God also said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let him rule over all the things on the earth." God formed the first man, Adam, from the dust of the ground and breathed life into him. Man became a special living soul. No animal was given the spiritual skills of love, wisdom, and truth in the image of God, only people. God planted a garden near Eden and put the first man there. In the middle of the garden stood the tree of life, and also the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God knew it was not good for man to be alone. He had all the animals pass in front of Adam. Adam named them all, including the birds. God knew that Adam needed more than just animals around him to help him with his daily living. So God put Adam into a deep sleep, took one of his ribs, and out of it formed a woman. Adam named her Eve. Adam said, "She is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken from man." Because of this first marriage, a man is still to leave his parents and hold tightly to his wife, and they shall live together as one. God blessed the man and woman and said, "Fill the earth with people and use it. You are to take care of the earth and every living thing upon it." And there was evening and morning, the sixth day. Day 7. On the seventh day God rested. He blessed the seventh day because on it he rested from all his work.
The temptation of Adam and Eve, Genesis 3. Satan, who is the devil, appeared in the shape and likeness of a serpent. He spoke to Eve, "Has God told you not to eat from any tree in the garden?" Eve answered, "We may eat the fruit of all the trees except for the tree in the middle of the garden. God said if we eat it, or even touch it, we will die." Satan said, "You won't die. God knows if you eat it, you'll become like him, knowing good and evil." The devil lied and called God a liar, but Eve didn't question him, and she didn't go to God to learn the truth. The fruit looked good to her, so she ate some and gave some to Adam. He ate too. The knowledge of good and evil made Adam and Eve ashamed that they were naked, so they made clothes out of leaves. Then, knowing they had sinned against God, they were afraid of him and tried to hide. God knew where they were hiding. He sees everything. He asked, "Why have you disobeyed me?" Adam said, "Eve gave me the fruit." And Eve said, "It's the serpent's fault." God disciplined all three, Eve, Adam, and the serpent. God cursed the serpent and forced him to crawl on his belly and eat dust all his life. Adam would have to work hard. His fields would now have weeds and thistles. Eve would have pain when she gave birth to a child. And because she let the serpent trick her, Adam was to be in charge. God made coats out of skins for Adam and Eve and clothed them. Then God sent them out of the garden and placed angels with a flaming sword at the entrance. Adam and Eve's sin brought in spiritual death. The word death means separation. Sin separates people from God. Their sin also brought in physical death. The body dies and the spirit returns to God. After their sin, God gave the first prophecy about Jesus, who will save us from sin. God said, "There will be hatred between the serpent, Satan, and the seed of the woman, Jesus. He will bruise your head, but you will bruise his heel." The devil bruised the heel of Jesus by helping put Jesus to death on the cross. But Jesus rose from the dead and permanently destroyed the devil's power. In that way, Jesus crushed the devil's head. Cain and Abel, Genesis 4. Adam and Eve had a son named Cain. He became a farmer. Their second son, Abel, raised sheep. Each of these men brought an offering to God. By faith, Abel offered the right sacrifice. God accepted Abel and his offering of sheep, but did not accept Cain and his offering of plants. Cain got very angry. God said, "Why are you mad? Why do you scowl? If you do the right things, you'll be happy. But if you don't, it will lead to sin. So get in control." But later, when they were in the field, Cain killed his brother Abel. God asked Cain, "Where is Abel?" Cain said, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" God said, "The voice of your brother's blood cries to me from the ground." God drove Cain away and forced him to live in the land of Nod. Nod means wandering. Cain's children grew up to be evil, and so did their children. Adam and Eve had a third son, Seth. In those days, the people lived hundreds of years and had many, many children. Adam was 130 years old when Seth was born. After this, Adam lived 800 more years. Seth lived 912 years, and his son, Enosh, 905 years. The oldest man, Methuselah, lived 969 years. He was the grandfather of Noah. Methuselah's father, Enoch, did not die. Enoch walked with God, doing good and right, so God took him straight to heaven.
Noah, Genesis 6 through 9. In the days of Noah, the earth was filled with evil people. They were so evil that God was sorry he had made them. Noah was a righteous man who obeyed God. God told Noah to build a big boat out of gopher wood and to make it watertight. This boat was called an ark. God planned a great flood that would destroy every breathing thing on dry land. Everything God wanted to save must go inside the ark. For 120 years, Noah built the ark and prepared it for his family and the animals. During this time, Noah preached the word of God to people, trying to get them to obey God before it was too late. The people laughed at him. Finally, Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives, and all the birds and animals and creeping things entered the ark. They went in, male and female, 2 of every unclean animals they were not allowed to eat, and 14 of every bird and clean animals they were allowed to eat. Food was taken on board for all. Then God shut the door of the ark, and the flood came. Noah was 600 years old at this time. Rain poured down for the first time ever, and continued for 40 days and 40 nights. God also opened the fountains of the deep and released that water. All that lived on dry land died. Only Noah and those in the ark survived. The water covered the earth for 150 days, totally cleaning the earth of sin and its damage. The water slowly went back to where it came from. At the end of another 150 days, the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. After 40 more days, Noah sent out a raven. It flew out and back, coming and going. So Noah sent out a dove, but she returned to him because there was no place for her to rest. Noah waited 7 more days. He sent out the dove again, and she brought back an olive leaf. 7 days later, Noah sent her out again. This time, the dove did not return. When the earth finally dried up, Noah and his family and all the birds and animals left the ark. Noah built an altar and made a sacrifice to God of every clean animal and every clean bird. God blessed Noah and his family and told them, "Fill the earth again with people. Every living thing is to be food for you, with one exception. You are not to eat blood." At this time, God gave the death penalty for murdering a person. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for man was made in God's image. Then God made a covenant, a promise, between himself and man. God would never again send a worldwide flood upon the earth. God put a rainbow in the sky as a sign of this promise. The New Testament tells us that by faith, Noah built the ark, in which 8 people were saved through water. Noah lived to be 950 years old. Tower of Babel. Genesis 11. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. They had children, and their children had children, and their children had children. God told these people to spread out over all the earth, but they decided not to obey God. They built a tall tower so they could all live in one place. God was unhappy that the people disobeyed him. He looked at the city and the tower that the people were building and said, "These people all speak the same language. Let us mix up their languages so that they can't understand each other." When God did this, the people could not talk to each other. They moved apart and stopped building the city and tower. In this way, God scattered them over the face of the earth. The name of the city was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language and scattered the people. The Bible gives list of who was born to whom. This is needed to show how Jesus came from the family of Adam.
Call of Abram, Genesis 12. In patriarchal times, God spoke directly to the fathers. He chose one man, Abram, through whose family Jesus would someday be born. In Jesus, all the families of the earth would be blessed. God said to Abram, "Leave your father's house and go to a land I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. In you shall all the families of the earth be blessed." God didn't tell Abram where he was going, but Abram went anyway, obeying God. By faith, Abram left his home in Ur and went to Canaan. He took with him his wife, Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all his possessions. Abram lacks faith. Genesis 12 and 20. When Abram lived in Canaan, a famine came on the land. Food was hard to find, so Abram moved the family to Egypt. Sarai, Abram's wife, was beautiful. Abram feared that an Egyptian would kill him in order to marry her. Rather than trust God to protect him, Abram told Sarai, "Tell everyone that you are my sister." All the kings of Egypt were called Pharaoh. This Pharaoh wished to marry Sarai, but God troubled him and stopped his plan. When Pharaoh found out that Sarai was Abram's wife, he was mad at Abram for lying to him. He returned Sarai to Abram and sent them out of Egypt. Years later, Abram still did not fully trust in God. He told the same lie to King Abimelech of Gerar. God had to rescue Sarai by coming to King Abimelech in a dream and warning him not to take Sarai as his wife, or he would die. The rescue of Lot, Genesis 13 through 14. Abram left Egypt and returned to Canaan a very rich man. He had much cattle, silver, and gold. His nephew Lot also had become rich, and the land was not big enough for all their herds of animals. Their herdsmen began to fight, so Abram told Lot, "Pick the part of the land where you want to live, and I will live in the other part." Lot took the best land, choosing to live in the well-watered plains near the wicked city of Sodom. After Lot left, God told Abram, "Look around as far as you can see. I promise this land of Canaan to you and to your descendants forever." Years passed, and 4 kings from Babylon conquered the land where Lot lived. They stole all the good things and took the people as prisoners, including Lot, and started back home. Abram, who was living near Mamre, heard about Lot being captured. He took his trained men and caught up with the kings and their armies at Dan. Abram divided his force and attacked at night, defeating them. He rescued Lot, his possessions, and everyone, including the women. When Abram returned, he was met by Melchizedek, who was both king of Salem and a priest of God Most High. Melchizedek blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." Abram took a tenth of all he had taken from the kings and gave it to Melchizedek. The Bible does not tell us any more about this mysterious priest, Melchizedek, until he is mentioned in the New Testament book of Hebrews. The Hebrew writer explains that Melchizedek was greater than Abram, later to be known as Abraham. Promises to Abram, Genesis 15 through 17. Abram remembered God's promise that all of Canaan would be given to him and his descendants. He asked God, "Since I am childless and have no heir, will you keep your promise?" God came to Abram in a vision and said, "Now look towards the sky and count the stars, if you are able to count them. In the years to come, your children's children will be like the stars in the sky." Wanting to help God keep his promise, Sarai had Abram take her Egyptian maid Hagar as a wife. Hagar soon gave birth to a baby boy, Ishmael. Abram thought God's promises would come through Ishmael, but God said, "No, the promises are to come through a son born to you and Sarai." Abram fell on his face and laughed, because he was now 99 years old, and Sarai was 90. God changed Abram's name to Abraham, which means father of a multitude. Sarai's name was changed to Sarah, or princess. She was to be a mother of many nations. God made a promise to Abraham. In 1 year, Sarah would have a baby boy. They were to name him Isaac, meaning he laughs. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Genesis 18 through 19. The Lord came with 2 angels to Abraham's tent by the trees of Mamre. Abraham ran out to greet them and bowed before them, saying, "Please stay, rest for a while, and I will bring you a meal." As they ate, they said that Sarah would have a son. Sarah, overhearing this, laughed to herself because she was too old to have a child. The Lord said, "Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything impossible for God?" She said, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. But the Lord said, "Yes, you did." Then the 3 departed, and Abraham walked with them to see them off. Abraham would become great, the one through whom Jesus would come to bless all nations. Therefore the Lord decided to tell Abraham that he was going to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah because of their great sin. Abraham's nephew, Lot, was living in Sodom. When Abraham learned of the Lord's plans, he said, "Lord, would you destroy Sodom if there are 50 righteous people in the city, destroying the righteous with the wicked?" The Lord said, "No, for the sake of 50 righteous people, I will not destroy the city. Their righteousness will save everyone." So Abraham said, "What if there are only 45? Will you destroy the city for the lack of 5? The Lord said, "I will not destroy it if I find 45. And Abraham said, "What if only 40 righteous are found there?" The Lord said, "I will not destroy it for the 40's sake." Abraham asked for 30, then 20, and finally 10. Each time the Lord said he would not destroy Sodom if he could find that many righteous people. Then the Lord departed. The 2 angels went to Sodom and entered the city gates at evening. Lot saw them and invited them to stay at his house. The evil men of the city began to pound on Lot's door, demanding he turn the visitors over to them. When Lot told them that they were acting wickedly, they turned on him, saying, "We will treat you worse than your visitors." But the angels pulled Lot back into the house and blinded the men outside. Then the angels told Lot, "Gather your family and flee, for God has sent us to destroy this wicked city." The angels took hold of Lot, his 2 daughters, and his wife, and led them out of the city. The angels said to them, "Escape to the mountains, and do not look behind you, or you will be swept away." Lot asked instead to be allowed to go to the small town of Zoar. When Lot's family reached Zoar, Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. God rained down fire and brimstone from heaven, completely destroying the cities. When Abraham looked toward the cities of the plains, he saw the smoke of the land rising like smoke from a furnace. Isaac and Ishmael. Genesis 21. Isaac was born to Abraham and Sarah, just as the Lord had promised. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. Ishmael was 14 then. As Isaac grew, Ishmael teased him. So Sarah said to Abraham, "Cast out Hagar with Ishmael, for her son will not inherit with mine." Abraham did as Sarah asked, and put together some food and water for Hagar and Ishmael. He sent them away, but they wandered in the wilderness, unable to find more water. When they ran out of water, Hagar thought Ishmael would die, so she laid him under a bush. She went a short distance away so she would not see him die. God heard their weeping, and an angel spoke to Hagar from heaven and said, "Do not fear, for I will make a great nation from your son." Then God showed them a well of water, saving their lives. Ishmael became the father of the Arab people. God used events like this to teach us spiritual lessons. The New Testament book of Galatians uses Isaac to illustrate those in Christ who will receive the promise, while Hagar and Ishmael illustrate those not in Christ who will be cast out. Abraham's test. Genesis 22. God tested Abraham, saying, "Take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him as a burnt offering to me." So, by faith, Abraham arose early in the morning and saddled his donkey. He took Isaac and 2 young men and started on the 3-day journey. He took firewood for the offering, but no animal to sacrifice. At the base of Mount Moriah, Abraham put the wood on Isaac, and they continued on together. Isaac asked, "Where is the lamb for the sacrifice?" Abraham said, "God will provide." When the altar was ready, Abraham bound Isaac's hands and laid him on it, and raised his knife to kill him. But the angel of the Lord spoke from heaven, calling, "Abraham, Abraham!" Abraham said, "Here am I." "Do not harm the boy, for now I know that you respect God, since you have not withheld your only son from me." Abraham looked and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. So Abraham offered the ram instead of Isaac. God blessed Abraham, saying, "I will multiply your seed as the stars of the heavens and the sand of the seashore. In your seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice."
A wife for Isaac, Genesis 24. Isaac's mother Sarah died when she was 127 years old. Abraham bought a cave in the field of Machpelah and buried her there. Abraham called in his most trusted servant and said, "Go to Haran and bring back a wife for Isaac. God does not want Isaac to marry a Canaanite woman, but rather one of our relatives." The servant said, What if she won't come? Should I take Isaac there?" Abraham said, "No! God brought me to this land. He promised to give it to my children. You must not take Isaac back there. God's angel will help you." So the servant took 10 camels and some of Abraham's riches with him. He and his men went to the city of Nahor. The servant prayed, "God, please show me which woman Isaac is to marry. I pray that whoever I ask for a drink, that this chosen one will say, 'Drink, and I will water your camels also.'" Before he had finished his prayer, Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel and the sister of Laban, arrived with the water pot on her shoulder. She went down to the well and filled her water pot. Abraham's servant ran to her and asked for a little drink. She said, "Drink, sir," and gave him all the water he needed. Then she said, "I will water your camels also." This was a lot of work, and when Rebekah was done, the servant took out a gold ring and bracelets and gave them to her. When he asked who she was, she said, "I am the granddaughter of Nahor." Nahor was Abraham's brother, so the servant realized God had answered his prayer. He had found the chosen bride for Isaac. He bowed down and worshipped God. Abraham's servant went with Rebekah to her home. Laban, her brother, welcomed him, inviting him in to eat. But the servant said, "I will not eat until I have told my story." When Rebekah's family heard how God had led the servant to them, Rebekah was allowed to go to Canaan. The servant gave gifts of gold and silver to Rebekah and to her mother and brother before they departed. Isaac was out walking in the fields when they arrived. He was 40 years old at this time. He and Rebekah were soon married. They loved each other very much. Abraham died at the age of 175. He was buried with Sarah in the cave of Machpelah. Isaac's family, Genesis 25. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. For 20 years they were unable to have children. They prayed about this, and God blessed them with twin sons. God said, "The older will serve the younger." When the boys were born, the first came out red all over, like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. The second came out holding on to the heel of his brother, and they named him Jacob. The boys grew. Esau was a skillful hunter and an outdoorsman. Isaac loved Esau because he ate the meat that Esau would bring back to him. Rebekah loved Jacob because he was a wholesome and quiet sort of man. One day, Jacob prepared some red lentil stew. Esau came in from hunting and was very hungry. He asked for some of Jacob's stew. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." Whoever had the right got the bigger share of their father's inheritance. It was extremely valuable. Yet Esau said, "I am about to die. What good would the birthright do me?" Esau ate and drank and left refreshed. He sold his birthright for a bowl of red stew, and so he despised his birthright. Esau was called Edom, meaning red. He became the father of the Edomites. Isaac's trickery, Genesis 26. There was a famine where Isaac lived. To find food, he moved to the land of the Philistines. He told King Abimelech that his wife, Rebekah, was his sister, telling the same lie that his father Abraham had told. The king found out and said, "What have you done to us? If someone had married your wife, you would have made a sin." He told the people not to hurt Isaac or Rebekah. Isaac's wealth grew more than 100 times, so he had huge herds and flocks. Because of this, King Abimelech asked him to move away. Isaac moved to the valley of Gerar. The Philistines had thrown dirt into some wells dug by Abraham, so Isaac's men dug the wells again. The herdsmen of Gerar claimed the first well as theirs, so Isaac called the well Esek, meaning quarrel. Isaac dug another well, and the Philistines claimed that one also. Isaac called it Sitnah, meaning hated. Isaac moved a little further and dug a third well. This time the Philistines left him alone. He named the well Rehoboth, meaning room, saying, "God has made room for us." God renewed the land promise to Isaac that he had given to Abraham. He also repeated the promise that in the seed, which is Christ, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. Isaac worshipped God and sacrificed to him. At Beersheba, King Abimelech made a covenant of peace between himself and Isaac, just as he had with Abraham. He could see that God was with Isaac. He wanted to prevent any battle between them, for he knew his people would lose. Isaac's men dug a well at Beersheba, which he called Shiva.
Jacob tricks Isaac, Genesis chapter 27. Isaac grew old, and his eyesight failed, so he could not see. He called in his son Esau, and said, "Go hunting, and bring me a wild animal to eat, and I will give you my blessing before I die." Rebekah heard what Isaac said to Esau, and thought of a plan to trick Isaac into giving the blessing to Jacob instead. She said to Jacob, "Take 2 goats from your flock, and I will prepare a meal that Isaac your father will like." Jacob did as his mother told him. After fixing the food, Rebekah tied goat skins to Jacob's arm and neck, and had him wear Esau's clothes. Then Jacob went to Isaac and told him he was Esau. Isaac was confused. He thought he recognized Jacob's voice, but could smell the field upon Esau's clothes. He touched Jacob's arm and felt the goat skin. Esau had very hairy arms, so Isaac thought that Jacob was Esau. When Isaac finished eating, he blessed Jacob with the blessing meant for Esau. Jacob had barely left the tent when Esau came back from hunting, prepared the food, and took it to Isaac. When Isaac found he had been tricked, he said, "I cannot take back the blessing. You will serve your brother." Because Jacob had taken away both his birthright and his blessing, Esau hated Jacob and planned to kill him. Rebekah was told of Esau's plan to kill his brother. Now Esau had married 2 Hittite wives who made life miserable for Isaac and Rebekah. So Rebekah asked Isaac to send Jacob to marry a wife from her own people. Isaac agreed and sent Jacob away to Laban, Rebekah's brother, who lived far away in Haran. This kept Jacob safe from Esau for many years. Jacob's vision, Genesis chapter 28. On the way to Haran, Jacob stopped at a certain place to sleep. There he dreamed of a ladder stretching into heaven, with angels going up and down it. God stood above it and said, "I am the God of Abraham and Isaac. I will give this land to you and your seed. In your seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will bring you back to this land." When Jacob awoke, he realized God had appeared to him. He called the place Bethel, meaning house of God. Jacob vowed, "If you, God, will watch over me and protect me, then I will give back 1/10 of all you give to me." Jacob marries Leah and Rachel, Genesis chapter 29 and 30. When Jacob arrived in Haran, he met shepherds gathered by a well. A huge stone covered the well, and the shepherds were waiting for all to arrive before rolling off the stone and watering their sheep. When Rachel came with her father's sheep, Jacob rolled the stone off the well and watered them for her. He told her he was Rebekah's son.
Rachel was happy to hear this and ran home to tell her father Laban. Laban went to the well to welcome Jacob. Jacob stayed with the family and helped them with their work. After a month, Laban asked Jacob, "What wage would you like for the work you are doing?" Jacob answered, "I will work 7 years for you if I can marry Rachel." Laban had 2 daughters, Leah the oldest, and Rachel. Rachel was beautiful, and Jacob loved her, so Laban agreed to Jacob's request. When the 7 years were over, Jacob had his wedding, but when the wedding was over, he discovered his bride was Leah and not Rachel. Jacob was very angry and went to Laban, "What is this that you have done to me?" Laban said, "Leah is the oldest and should be married first. If you wish to marry Rachel, you must promise to work another 7 years." So Jacob arranged another wedding and married Rachel, then worked the 7 years. God saw that Leah was not loved and blessed her with 4 children, Reuben the oldest, then Simeon, Levi, and Judah. When Rachel saw her sister's children, she was jealous and gave her handmaid Bilhah to Jacob as a wife. Bilhah had 2 boys, Dan and Naphtali. When Leah thought she could no longer have children, she gave her handmaid Zilpah to Jacob as a wife. Zilpah had 2 boys, Gad and Asher. Then Leah had a 5th son, Issachar, and a 6th, Zebulun, and then a girl, Dinah. Then God allowed Rachel to have a boy, Joseph. All this time Jacob had been working for Laban. God blessed what Jacob did, so that Laban's flocks and wealth had grown 100-fold. Then Jacob said to Laban, "I wish to return to my own country." Laban said, "Please stay, because God is blessing me through you." Jacob said he would stay. This time for his wages, he asked for the spotted and speckled goats and all the black lambs born from that time forward. Laban agreed, but separated out all the spotted and speckled goats and all the black sheep. He drove them away from Jacob, a distance of 3 days. So Jacob took branches from the trees and peeled off bits of bark, so that they looked spotted. Whenever the stronger animals came to drink, he would place the spotted branches in the gutters of the watering troughs. He would take them away when the weaker animals came. With God's help, the stronger animals bore spotted and speckled babies, while the weaker animals did not. Thus Jacob's herd grew in strength and number, while Laban's became feeble and weak. Jacob returns to Canaan. Genesis chapter 31. Jacob's herds continued to grow in strength and number. When Laban's sons saw their father's herds getting smaller and Jacob's growing, they became very angry and turned Laban against Jacob. Jacob told Rachel and Leah, "Your father Laban has changed my wages 10 times, trying to get the advantage. Now God has told me it is time to leave." So Jacob gathered his family and herds and left, not telling Laban he was going. When Laban found out, he chased after Jacob, catching up to him 10 days later in the mountains of Gilead. God spoke to Laban in a dream and said, "Be careful what you say to Jacob." So Laban asked Jacob, "Why have you sneaked away, taking my daughters and herds and household gods?" Jacob said, "I was afraid that you would take your daughters back, but whoever stole the household gods will die." Jacob said this not knowing that Rachel had stolen them. Laban searched Jacob's tents and all his possessions, but could not find the little idols, because Rachel sat on them. The idols were very important to Laban because whoever had them could claim Laban's entire estate. Jacob said to Laban, "I have worked 20 years for you, and you have changed my wages 10 times, charging me for all sick, lost, and stolen animals. If you had your way, I would have gone away empty, but behold, God has blessed me." Laban and Jacob made a covenant, an agreement of peace. Laban went back to his home, and Jacob returned to Canaan. Jacob wrestles with an angel. Genesis chapters 32 33 and 35. Jacob sent servants to Esau his brother, who now lived in the land of Edom, telling him he was returning to Canaan. The servants returned, saying, Esau is coming with 400 men. Afraid that Esau still wanted to kill him, Jacob prayed to God for help. Then he put his herds into droves, each separated by some space, and sent them on ahead. The drovers were to tell Esau that the herds were gifts from Jacob. Jacob left his family on one side of the Jabbok River and spent the night all alone on the other side. That night an angel wrestled with Jacob until morning. When the angel could not win, he touched Jacob's thigh and crippled him. Jacob said, I will not turn you loose until you bless me. The angel blessed Jacob and changed his name to Israel, meaning one who strives with God and wins. When Jacob saw Esau approaching, he put the handmaids and their children in front, then Leah and her children, then Rachel and Joseph. Then he went in front of them to meet Esau. They met as brothers should, as friends. Esau refused to take the herds as gifts until Jacob insisted. They parted in peace, and Jacob continued on his journey, finally arriving at Bethel. There God renewed his promise to Jacob. At this time God officially changed Jacob's name to Israel. As they journeyed on and came near Bethlehem, Rachel gave birth to Benjamin. She died while doing so. This gave Jacob 12 sons. From these 12 sons would come the 12 tribes of Israel. So Jacob lived in the land of Isaac, his father, the land of Canaan. Isaac died at the age of 180, and his sons Jacob and Esau buried him.
Joseph is sold into Egypt. Genesis 37. Jacob, now called Israel, loved Joseph more than all his other sons and made him a coat of many colors. His brothers were jealous of Joseph and hated him. One night Joseph had a dream. He told it to his brothers. In my dream, we were all binding sheaves in a field. My sheaf stood upright, and your sheaves bowed down to mine. When they heard this, they hated him even more. He had another dream. The sun and moon and 11 stars bowed down to me. When Joseph told his brothers this dream, his father Israel scolded him, saying, Shall I and your mother and your brothers bow down to you? When Joseph was 17 years old, his brothers were tending the sheep at Shechem. Israel sent Joseph to see how they were doing. When Joseph got to Shechem, he found his brothers had gone to Dothan, so he followed them there. His brothers saw him coming from far off and planned to kill him. The oldest brother, Reuben, said, Let's throw him into a pit. He secretly planned to rescue Joseph and return him to his father. They removed Joseph's coat and threw him into an empty pit. While Reuben was gone, the other brothers stopped a passing caravan and sold Joseph to some Midianite traders for 20 pieces of silver. These men took Joseph to Egypt and sold him to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard. The brothers tore Joseph's coat and dipped it in goat's blood, and then showed the coat to their father. When Israel saw it, he thought a wild beast had killed Joseph. He cried and mourned and refused to be comforted. Joseph in Egypt. Genesis 39 through 40. God was with Joseph in Egypt and blessed the work he did. Potiphar, his master, put him in charge of his house. He trusted Joseph and left all he had in Joseph's control. Now Potiphar's wife tried to entice Joseph to sin, but Joseph fled, leaving his garment in her hand. She showed it to Potiphar, saying, Joseph attacked me. Angry and not knowing the truth, Potiphar threw Joseph into prison. God was with Joseph there also, and the prison keeper soon put all the prisoners under Joseph's care. The kings of Egypt were all called Pharaoh. Pharaoh's cupbearer and his baker angered Pharaoh, so he had them thrown into prison. Some time later, they both had a dream, but they could not understand what their dreams meant. When Joseph saw they were sad, he asked them to tell him their dreams, for he said, "The interpretation of dreams belongs to God." The cupbearer told Joseph his dream. "A vine of grapes grew before me, with 3 branches. The branches flowered, then grapes grew. I pressed the ripe grapes into Pharaoh's cup and handed it to Pharaoh." Joseph said, "The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days you will again serve Pharaoh and hand him his cup. When you are with Pharaoh again, please do not forget me, as I have done nothing wrong to be thrown into prison." Hearing such a good interpretation for the cupbearer, the baker then told Joseph his dream. 3 baskets of white bread were on my head, and birds came and ate the bread out of the baskets. Joseph said, "The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days you will lose your head and be hanged from a tree." 3 days later, the Pharaoh held a feast. He had the baker hanged, but restored the cupbearer to his former job. Yet the cupbearer forgot all about Joseph, who was left in jail. Joseph becomes ruler of Egypt. Genesis 41. Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, had a dream. In it he was standing by the Nile River. 7 fat cows came out of the river and fed on the reeds. As he watched, 7 skinny cows came out of the river and ate the fat cows. Pharaoh woke up. When he went back to sleep, he had another dream. This time 7 ears of grain, full and good, came up on one stalk. And 7 other ears of grain, thin and blasted by the east wind, swallowed the fat ears. When Pharaoh arose, he was troubled by the dreams and wondered what they meant. Even his magicians and wise men could not tell him the meanings. Then Pharaoh's cupbearer remembered Joseph and told Pharaoh about the young Hebrew who had interpreted his dream 2 years before. When called before the king, Joseph shaved and changed his clothes and then went to see Pharaoh. Joseph said, "I can only interpret dreams if God tells me what they mean. Because the dreams are doubled, it means that it is from God and will happen in a very short time. The 7 good cows and ears of grain mean there will be 7 years of plenty. But after that will come 7 years of famine, so terrible that it will swallow up all the food and eat up the land. You, Pharaoh, should appoint a very wise man to oversee taking up a 5th part of all food during the years of plenty and storing it for the years of famine." This suggestion sounded good to Pharaoh and his servants, and he appointed Joseph to be that wise man, placing him over all the land of Egypt, ruling everyone except Pharaoh himself. Pharaoh gave Joseph his signet ring, which was a sign of his authority, fine clothes, a gold necklace, and a wife, Asenath, the daughter of the priest of On. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh. During the first 7 years, the land produced plenty, and Joseph gathered a huge amount of food like the sand of the sea, beyond measure, and stored it. He also had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Then the 7 years of famine started, and the people came to Joseph to buy food. The famine covered the whole world, and people of all countries came to Egypt to buy grain in order to survive. Joseph and his brothers, Genesis 42 through 44. During the famine, Jacob, now called Israel, sent 10 of his sons from the land of Canaan to Egypt to buy food so they would not die. He kept his youngest son, Benjamin, at home to keep him safe. When Joseph's brothers got to Egypt, they bowed down before Joseph. Joseph recognized them, but they didn't know who he was. He also remembered his dreams, now coming true, that his older brothers would bow down to him. Joseph accused his brothers of being spies and threw them into jail for 3 days. They said, "We are 10 of 12 sons of Israel. Our youngest brother, Benjamin, is still with our father, and one is not alive." Joseph demanded, "One of you must stay behind in jail while the others go to get Benjamin and bring him back to prove you are telling the truth." Simeon was bound and the rest sent on their way. Joseph secretly put their money back into their sacks of grain. When the brothers stopped to feed their animals, they found their money and said, "Oh no." When they arrived home, they told Israel what had happened. He said, "Joseph is dead and Simeon is gone. Would you also take Benjamin from me?" So he refused to send Benjamin. When they ran out of food again, Judah begged his father to let Benjamin go with them. He promised to take care of Benjamin or bear the blame forever. So Israel allowed Benjamin to go, sending along gifts and double the amount of money needed. When the brothers arrived in Egypt, Joseph ordered a meal prepared for his brothers in his own house. Their brothers were afraid, thinking that Joseph was trying to find a reason to take their possessions and put them into bondage. Upon seeing Benjamin, Joseph left the room to weep. Their brothers were seated at the meal according to their age. Benjamin was given 5 times the amount of food as his brothers. They all wondered about this while they feasted with Joseph. The next morning the brothers left, but Joseph had his steward put everyone's money in their sacks again. In Benjamin's sack he also put Joseph's silver cup. As soon as they had traveled a short distance out of the city, Joseph had his steward catch them and accuse them of theft. He did this to test them. Because the cup was found in Benjamin's sack, Joseph said, "I'll keep Benjamin as my servant and send the rest of you home." Then Judah said, "The boy is one of 2 sons of our father's wife. One son is gone, and if harm should happen to Benjamin, our father will die. I'll take his place as your servant, for I can't go home without him." Joseph brings Jacob to Egypt. Genesis 45 through 50. When Joseph heard Judah's offer to become his servant in Benjamin's place, Joseph wept. He sent everyone away except his brothers, and then he told them who he really was, the brother they had sold into slavery. This frightened his brothers, but Joseph said, "The famine still has 5 years to go. God placed me over Egypt so I could keep our family from starving to death. You must return to Canaan and bring Jacob and all our family to Egypt." Pharaoh was pleased when he heard about Joseph's family and gave them everything they would need for the journey, including money, clothes, donkeys, and wagons. Jacob did not believe that Joseph was alive until he saw the wagons and all the gifts Joseph had sent him. He gathered his family and possessions and went to Egypt, stopping on the way at Beersheba. There God spoke to him, "Do not be afraid to go into Egypt, for there I will make a great nation from you." In Genesis 15, God told Abraham that the people would live in a foreign land for 400 years. This was the beginning of that time. Jacob was 130 years old. Joseph took his chariot and went to meet his father. To keep the Hebrew people separate from the Egyptians, he had them tell Pharaoh that they were shepherds. Now a shepherd is an abomination to an Egyptian, and this kept the 2 nations from intermarrying. Pharaoh told them to live in the land of Goshen, the best of all the land in Egypt. Each year, the Egyptian people became worse off as the famine continued. They used money to buy food. Then, when their money was gone, they sold their cattle and other goods to Joseph, then their land, and finally themselves. So it was when the famine was over, Pharaoh owned everything in Egypt, except for the possessions of the priests, who were given their portions by Pharaoh. Israel realized the time had come for him to die, so he made Joseph promise to bury him in the cave with Abraham. Then Joseph brought his sons for Israel to bless. Israel did so, deliberately crossing his hands to bless the younger boy, Ephraim, over the older one, Manasseh. When Israel died, his family embalmed his body and carried it back to Mamre, to the cave at Machpelah. Then Joseph and all who were with him returned to Egypt. Now that Israel was dead, Joseph's brothers feared revenge, and again asked for Joseph's forgiveness. Joseph said, "Am I in the place of God? Fear not. You meant me evil, but God made all these bad things turn out good to save our people." Joseph lived 110 years. Before he died, he told the Israelites that God would take good care of them and one day bring them out of Egypt. God had promised this to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Israelites were instructed by Joseph to take his embalmed body out of Egypt with them.
The birth and education of Moses. Exodus chapters 1 through 2. Israel and his family, 70 people counting Joseph, lived in Egypt during the famine. Over the years, Joseph and all his brothers died. New generations of children grew up, became strong, and filled the land. After 400 years, there were enough Israelites to make a nation. A new Pharaoh ruled Egypt who did not know Joseph. This Pharaoh saw the growing number of Israelites. He was afraid they might join an enemy and fight against him. So he set taskmasters over the Israelites and made them work hard. But the harder they worked, the more children they had. So Pharaoh ordered the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, to kill all the boy babies as soon as they were born. Shiphrah and Puah feared God, so they did not obey Pharaoh. When Pharaoh saw all the boy babies alive, he called the midwives and asked why. They said, "The Hebrew women are so strong. They give birth before we get to them." God knew the midwives were obeying him and not Pharaoh, so God blessed them with families of their own. Then Pharaoh commanded his people to throw any Hebrew baby boy into the Nile River to drown. At this time, Amram and Jochebed, both descendants of Levi, had a baby boy. The baby's brother Aaron was 3 years old, so was safe. So was his older sister Miriam, but baby Moses was to be put into the river. Jochebed, his mother, hid Moses for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she made a small chest out of papyrus reeds and covered it with tar and pitch. Then she put her baby inside, closed the lid, and placed the chest into the reeds at the bank of the Nile River. His sister, Miriam, stood afar off to see what happened. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to the river to bathe. She saw the chest and sent her maid to bring it to her. When it was opened, the baby cried. Pharaoh's daughter felt sorry for the baby, saying, "This is one of the Hebrew children." Then Miriam came closer and asked, "Shall I go and call one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go ahead." So Miriam went back and called Jochebed. Pharaoh's daughter paid Jochebed to care for Moses as he was growing up. Jochebed taught Moses to put his faith in God in heaven. The child grew, and Jochebed brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own son. She named him Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water." Moses studied all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and works. When he was 40, Moses went out to see the Israelites. He found one of them being beaten by an Egyptian taskmaster. He defended the Israelite and killed the Egyptian. He thought his people would realize that God was sending him to help them. But the next day, when he tried to stop a quarrel between 2 Hebrew men, one of them asked, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Are you going to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Pharaoh heard what had happened and sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled into the land of Midian. There Moses sat down by a well.
Now Jethro, the priest of Midian, had 7 daughters. When they came to water their father's flocks, the other shepherds drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them. When the daughters came home, their father said, "Why have you returned home so soon?" The girls replied, "An Egyptian helped us." "Why did you leave him behind? Bring him home." So Moses was invited to live with the priest and his family. Moses married Zipporah, one of Jethro's daughters. They had a son called Gershom, for Moses said, "I have been a traveler in a foreign land." The burning bush. Exodus chapters 3 through 4. The Pharaoh who tried to kill Moses died, and another Pharaoh took his place, but he kept the Israelites in slavery. God heard their cries and remembered his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that he would bring the Israelites out of Egypt. They would need a strong leader to deliver them. Moses would be that man. Moses had spent 40 years taking care of the flocks of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. When Moses was 80 years old, he led the flock to the far side of Horeb, the mountain of God. A bush was on fire, but it didn't burn up. When Moses turned aside to look at this marvelous sight, God called to him from the bush, "Moses, Moses." Moses replied, "Here I am." Then God said, "Do not come near here. Remove your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob." Moses removed his sandals and hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. God said to Moses, "I have heard the cries of my people. I have come to deliver them out of Egypt, into a land flowing with milk and honey. I'll send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring them out of Egypt." Moses said, "Who, me? I can't do that." God said, "I'll be with you. When you bring them out, you will serve me on this mountain." Moses said, "When I get to the children of Israel, who shall I say sent me?" God said, "I am who I am. Thus you shall say, 'I am has sent me.' This is my name forever." I am means eternal. It means someone who has always been and is now and always will be. God told Moses, "Ask Pharaoh to let the people go 3 days' journey into the wilderness to worship me." God knew that Pharaoh would not let the people go. God said, "I will strike the Egyptians so hard that when the Israelites finally are allowed to leave, the Egyptians will give them silver, gold, and clothing. So my people will not leave Egypt empty-handed." Then Moses said, "They won't believe me when I say you sent me." God said, "Throw your rod upon the ground." Moses did, and the rod became a snake, and Moses ran from it. God told him to pick it up by the tail, and it became a rod again. Then God said, "Put your hand into your coat." When Moses did, it came out white with leprosy. When Moses put his hand back in, it came out clean. God said, "You'll be able to take water from the river and pour it on the ground, and the water will turn to blood." God gave Moses these 3 signs to prove that he was with him. Then Moses said, "Oh God, I'm not a good speaker, and I'm not getting any better standing here talking with you." God said, "Who made your mouth?" "Please, God, send the message by anybody else, anyone you choose." This made God angry, and he said, "Your brother Aaron speaks well. He is coming to meet you. He will be your spokesman. I'll tell you what to say. He'll be like a prophet for you, and you'll be as a ruler to him." So Moses returned to Jethro and said goodbye to his family. In the meantime, God sent Aaron to meet Moses at Mount Horeb. In Egypt, Moses and Aaron gathered the elders of Israel together, and Moses showed them the miracles God had given him. The people believed and worshipped God. Their deliverer had finally come. Moses and Aaron before Pharaoh. Exodus chapters 5 through 7. Moses and his brother Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, "Jehovah our God says, 'Let my people go, that they may worship me.'" Pharaoh said, "Who is Jehovah, that I should let Israel go?" That same day Pharaoh told his taskmasters, "Make the Israelites gather their own straw to make bricks, for these people are lazy. Don't give them any free time to think about worshiping their God." The people could not gather straw and still make the same number of bricks as before, so the officers of the Israelites were beaten. They met with Moses and Aaron, saying, "We'll all be killed because you asked Pharaoh to let us worship God in the wilderness." Moses asked God, "What is happening? Why did you send me? The people are now worse off, and you haven't delivered them." So God renewed his promise to bring the Israelites out of Egypt and into Canaan, the land promised to Abraham. God sent Moses and Aaron to talk to Pharaoh again. Aaron threw his rod upon the floor, and it became a snake. Pharaoh called in his magicians and threw their rods on the floor, and these became snakes also. Then Aaron's snake swallowed up their snakes, but Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He would not let the people go. The following day, God told Moses, "Have Aaron stretch his rod over the Nile River, over streams and pools of water, so that all the water turns to blood." So the fish died, the whole Nile River stunk, and blood was throughout all the land of Egypt. But the magicians copied what Moses did, so Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen. The Egyptians had to dig wells to find water to drink. They could not drink the water from the Nile River for 7 days. More plagues on Egypt. Exodus chapters 8 through 11. Once more God had Aaron stretch his rod over the waters of Egypt. This time frogs came up out of the waters and covered the land and went into the houses and bedrooms and ovens. Once again the magicians had a trick that copied this. Pharaoh had to ask Moses and Aaron to make the frogs go away, yet still he would not let the people go. Then God sent lice upon the land. The magicians tried to copy God, but they could not. So they told Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh would not listen to them. Next, God sent flies over all the land of Egypt, but there were no flies in Goshen where the Israelites lived. The flies swarmed over everything, and it was terrible. So Pharaoh called Moses and said, "Have your people worship their God in the land. Only do not leave Egypt." Moses said, "No, we must leave." Pharaoh said, "Don't go far." Once the flies were gone, Pharaoh refused to let the people go. So this time God killed all the livestock belonging to the Egyptians. However, none of the Israelites' animals were harmed. Yet Pharaoh's heart remained stubborn, and he would not let the people go. Moses then sprinkled ashes toward heaven in the sight of Pharaoh, and boils, sores on the skin, came upon all the Egyptians, including the magicians. All these plagues were done using the things the Egyptians worshipped as their gods. This showed God was greater than all the idols that the Egyptians worshipped. Next, Moses warned them, "God will send down hail. Any man or beast not under shelter will die." Those of Pharaoh's servants who feared God's word fled into their houses, taking their animals with them. Those who did not died. The hail broke trees and destroyed all the ripe crops. Yet there was no hail in the land of Goshen. Then Pharaoh called Moses and said, "I have sinned. Jehovah is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. Ask God to stop the hail, and I'll let you go." But as soon as the hail stopped, Pharaoh refused to let them go. So God called down a plague of locusts, which ate every living green thing. Pharaoh's servants said to him, "Let them go! Do you not know that Egypt is destroyed?" But he would not listen. The next plague was 3 days of darkness, a darkness that could be felt. No one could see his hand in front of his face. Yet the Israelites had light in all their homes. Then God told Moses, "Have the Israelites ask the Egyptians for jewelry of gold and silver. I will cause the Egyptians to give freely of their wealth. There will be one more plague, and after that Pharaoh will drive you out of Egypt." So Moses went to Pharaoh and said, "At midnight Gog will go throughout the land of Egypt, and all the firstborn of the land will die, from Pharaoh's firstborn to the firstborn of the servant and all the firstborn of the cattle. And a great cry will go throughout Egypt, such as has never been heard before. But against the children of Israel not even a dog will whine, that you may know that God decides between Egypt and Israel." Then Moses, in hot anger, left Pharaoh. The Passover, Exodus chapters 12 through 13. God told Moses, "I will go through the land of Egypt and kill every firstborn man and beast, showing my power over all the gods of Egypt. Follow my instructions carefully, so that the destroyer will not visit your homes. Eat flat bread containing no leaven, yeast, for you will leave Egypt so fast you will have no time for your bread to rise. Be dressed and ready to leave, for when I am finished, Pharaoh will send you out of Egypt." At twilight, each Israelite household sacrificed a year-old male lamb without spot or blemish. They took hyssop, dipped it in the blood, and smeared the blood upon the lintel and down the sides of the doorpost. They went inside their houses and did not come out until the next morning. That night they observed the Passover by eating the slain lamb and unleavened bread. They wore traveling clothes and ate the Passover meal in a hurry. At midnight, God's destroyer went through the land. He passed over all the homes with the blood of the lamb on the doorpost. No firstborn died in those homes, but in all the homes of the Egyptians, at least one person or animal died. Even Pharaoh lost his son. There came a great cry out of Egypt. Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron. "Rise up and leave this country, you and your families and all your herds. Go serve Jehovah as you have asked." The Egyptians, afraid that they would all die, gave their gold and silver and fine clothing to the Israelites. God led his people by the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea. He led them with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire at night. Since they were journeying through the desert, the cloud would give them moisture and shade from the sun. The fire gave them heat and light at night, so they traveled by day and night. Moses took the bones of Joseph with them, just as Joseph had asked for them to do. The Israelites had lived in Egypt for 430 years exactly. The Red Sea Crossing, Exodus chapters 14 through 15. God said to Moses, "Turn back and camp by the Red Sea." God planned this so that Pharaoh would say, "The Israelites are wandering around lost. Why have we let them go from serving us? Let's go get them and bring them back." Pharaoh took his army with many chariots and chased after the Israelites. When the Israelites saw Pharaoh's army coming, they said to Moses, "Weren't there enough graves in Egypt? Why did you lead us out to die in the wilderness? Didn't we ask you to leave us alone to be slaves to the Egyptians?" Moses said, "Stand and see the salvation of God. The Egyptians you see now, you will see no more forever." God moved the cloud between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of the Israelites, hiding them. Moses stretched out his rod over the sea. Then God caused a strong east wind to blow and heap up the waters of the Red Sea so that dry land appeared. The Israelites walked across the seabed with walls of water on each side of them and the cloud over them. This divide had to be at least 2 miles wide so that the 5 to 6 million Israelites could cross in just one night with all their animals and possessions. The Egyptians followed them into the sea, but God caused their wheels to have trouble, so they said, "Let us flee from Israel, for their God is fighting against us." Then Moses stretched his rod over the sea, and the water returned to its proper place, covering up the army of Egypt. They were seen no more alive, as God had promised. Then Moses and the men sang a song of God's victory. Miriam, the sister of Moses, and the women took their instruments and danced. All were happy with this great deliverance. Moses led the people into the wilderness of Shur, and they were without water for 3 days. They came to Marah, but the water there was bitter, so they couldn't drink it. The people murmured against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" Then God showed Moses a tree, and Moses threw it into the waters, and the waters became sweet. God made a promise. "If you obey my commandments, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians." Next they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 date palms, and they camped there. The journey to Mount Sinai. Exodus chapters 16 through 18. The Israelites came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, and murmured because they were hungry. So God sent them quail every evening and manna every morning. The quail flew in low and were easily caught. The manna appeared every morning for the 40 years they wandered in the wilderness. Manna was thin flakes of bread that looked like frost and was sweet to eat like wafers and honey. When the sun got hot, it melted. If kept overnight, it turned rotten and wormy. They were not to pick up any on the Sabbath day, our Saturday. So on Friday, when they picked up twice as much, God kept it from becoming wormy or rotten overnight. Next they camped at Rephidim, where there was no water to drink. The people complained against Moses again, so Moses cried to God and said, "What shall I do with these people? A little more and they will stone me." God said, "Take your rod and strike the rock." Moses did, and water came flowing out, enough to water the millions of people and their animals. Then the nation of Amalek came to fight the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses told Joshua, "Choose men to go out and fight." The next morning they fought Amalek. Moses stood on the top of a hill with the rod of God in his hand. As long as he held the rod up, the Israelites won. But when his hands grew tired and he let down the rod, Amalek won. So they put a stone down for him to sit on. Aaron and Hur each supported his hands until sundown. By then Joshua and his men had won the battle. Now Jethro, the priest of Midian, the father-in-law of Moses, came to where the people were camped at the Mount of God. Jethro brought Moses' wife, Zipporah, and his 2 sons with him. He watched Moses judge the people. The people stood around Moses, waiting their turn from morning till night. Jethro realized this was too great a task for Moses to do by himself. So Jethro said to Moses, "Choose out able men who respect God, men of truth who hate bribes. Appoint them to be judges over thousands, hundreds, 50s, and 10s. This way, only the great matters will come to you, while the appointed judges can take care of the smaller matters." God gives the people his laws. Exodus 19 through 31. 3 months after leaving Egypt, the people came to Sinai and camped before the mountain. God called Moses up the mountain to him. God said, "Tell the people, if they will obey my voice, they will be my own possession, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." The people agreed to do all God commanded. God arranged to talk to them, saying, "Watch out that you do not touch the mountain, or you will die." That morning there were thunders and lightnings, and a thick cloud came upon the mountain. Moses brought the people near its base. The whole mountain smoked and shook because God had come down upon it. The people were afraid and trembled. God called Moses to the top of the mountain again and told him, "Go down and tell the people to stay away." Then God spoke the 10 Commandments to the Israelites. In the New Testament, Jesus tells us that the 10 Commandments are summed up in these words: "You shall love the Lord your God. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And all things that you would want people to do to you, you should do to them." The first 4 commandments focus on loving God. The first commandment is, "I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me." We are to worship God only. The second commandment is, "You shall not make a graven image, any symbol used to represent God, or any likeness of what is in heaven, on earth, or in the water. You shall not worship them or serve them." Commandment 3 is, "You shall not take the name of God in vain," using God's name without respect and honor. The fourth commandment is, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." This is the only commandment not repeated to us in the New Testament. In the New Testament, we are commanded to remember the Lord's Day, the first day of the week. The rest of the commandments center around loving our neighbors, or each other. Commandment 5 says, "Honor your father and your mother, so that you might live a long life." Later, God gives laws on taking care of elderly parents. Commandment 6 says, "You shall not murder, unlawfully take another person's life." Commandment 7 honors the rights of marriage. "You shall not commit adultery." Commandment 8 sets up property rights. "You shall not steal." Commandment 9 says, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor," failing to speak up, lying, or being deceitful. Commandment 10 is, "You shall not covet or desire strongly things that are not yours," selfishness. When the people saw the thunders and lightnings and the mountain smoking, they trembled and stood afar off. They said to Moses, "Don't let God speak, or we'll die. You speak to us." God told Moses, "People should sacrifice animals to me on an altar of earth or uncut stones. A tool must not touch the stones, for that would make them unclean." Then God gave the people laws that would help them apply the basic 10 Commandments. He also mentions the consequences that go with breaking these laws. For crimes that are centered around possessions or things, the guilty were to pay money or property. If a thief is caught, he shall pay double. For most crimes against people, the death penalty was given. He who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death, but only if there were more than one witness. He who strikes his mother or father shall be put to death. If an ox gores a man and kills him, the ox shall be put to death. But if the ox was known to be dangerous, and the owner did not keep him penned, then the owner would be put to death also. God gave the Israelites many more examples of his law, such as, "You shall not follow a crowd in doing evil." God also told the Israelites he would take them to Canaan and destroy the people living there, because those people had been very evil and had sinned greatly, even sacrificing their own children. God warned the Israelites not to make any agreements with them, for any Canaanites left in the area would later cause trouble. The people agreed to all the things God told them. Moses sacrificed young bulls and sprinkled the blood on the people, saying, "Behold, the blood of the covenant, which is an agreement between God and us." When God called Moses back up on the mountain, Joshua went part way with him. God gave Moses many laws and the 10 Commandments written on 2 tablets of stone. God told him how to build the tent-like tabernacle, a place of worship they could carry with them. The golden calf. Exodus chapters 32 through 34. Moses talked with God on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. The people decided something had happened to Moses, so they asked Aaron to make a golden calf to be their god. Aaron asked the people for their golden earrings. He melted them down and made a calf idol. This was forbidden by the 2nd commandment. The people said, "This is our God who brought us out of Egypt." They had a feast to worship their calf idol and partied indecently. God saw all this and told Moses, "Go down, for already the people have sinned. I will kill them all and make a great nation from you." Moses answered, "Why would you kill them after saving them in such an awesome manner? People will say that you brought them out just to kill them." God changed his mind and did not destroy them. He gave Moses 2 stone tablets on which he had written the 10 Commandments with his finger. Moses met Joshua, and they walked back to where the people were camped. The golden calf made Moses so angry, he broke the stone tablets at the base of the mountain. He took the calf and melted it down, and ground it to powder, and threw the powder on the surface of the water. Then he made the Israelites drink it. Moses asked Aaron, "What did the people do to you to cause you to do this great sin?" Aaron lied, saying, "Don't be mad at me. The people gave me their gold. I just threw it into the fire and this calf jumped out." God punished the people because of what they did with the calf. God said to them, "From now on, my angel will lead you to Canaan, but I, God, cannot go in your midst, because if I did, I would surely kill you for all your stubborn ways." God called Moses up onto the mountain again and gave him a new copy of the 10 Commandments. When Moses came down, the Israelites were afraid to come near him, because his face shone brightly after being in the presence of Almighty God. The building of the tabernacle. Exodus chapters 35 through 40. Moses gathered all the Israelites and told them about the tabernacle, a beautiful place for worship that God wanted them to build. They took the gold, silver, and bronze, along with the clothes and jewelry they had brought out of Egypt, and offered them freely for the tabernacle and the priest's garments. Skilled women spun goat's hair and blue, purple, and scarlet material and fine linen. The men brought acacia wood, precious stones, spices, and oil. The tabernacle was built following God's directions and made of the finest materials. It had 2 rooms separated by a floor-to-ceiling curtain or veil. The smaller room was called the Holy of Holies. It contained only the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark was a wooden box or chest. It was covered inside and out with pure gold. The 2 stone tablets on which the 10 Commandments were written were placed in the Ark. Later, a pot of manna and Aaron's rod that budded were also put into the Ark. Rings of gold were set at its 4 feet, and long poles covered with gold were placed in the rings so the Ark could be carried. The cover of the Ark was called the mercy seat. It was made out of 1 solid block of pure gold. This cover had a cherub with wings outstretched on each end. The cherubim were to face each other. No one except a priest was to touch the Ark, as it was the very throne of God on earth. Here God met with the high priest once each year when the high priest went into the Holy of Holies to atone for the sins of the people. God told the people to place certain furnishings in the larger room, the holy place. These furnishings were covered with gold and included an altar of incense, a table holding unleavened bread, and a lampstand to hold 7 lamps. The bread was placed fresh every Sabbath upon the table, and the priest would eat the old loaves in the holy place. Outside the tabernacle, in the fenced outer court, the altar for burnt offerings stood beside the bronze laver. The laver was where the priest had to wash their hands and feet in water before entering the tabernacle, or they would die. God used the tabernacle and its furnishings to give us an example of the Christian religion. The Holy of Holies represented heaven. The holy place represented the church. The mercy seat represented Christ, our place of mercy. The lampstand represented the light of the gospel. The incense was like the prayers of Christians. The actions of the priest, washing in the laver, represented baptism or cleansing. The high priest represented Christ, and the priest represented Christians. So the Old Testament tabernacle was a picture of the New Testament church. Leviticus. In this book, God gave the basic rules of true religion. All priests were to come only from the tribe of Levi. Only a descendant of Aaron could be a high priest, and only the high priest could go into the Holy of Holies, which he did once a year. The other priests served in the holy place and took care of all the rest of the tabernacle and its furnishings. God carefully pointed out concepts dealing with the atonement of sin, sacrifices made to God, and the shedding of blood to wash away sin. Religious laws not only affect our worship and service to God, but also the way we live daily. God set up rules governing money, work, possession of land, marriage, and divorce. He also made statements of fact, such as, "The life of the flesh is in the blood." That is why God forbids the eating of blood. God gave detailed instructions for worship. He insisted that everything be holy, set apart, as special to Him. This includes the Bible, God's people, His priest, and the tabernacle with its furnishings. God answered the question, how can unholy people approach a holy God? People are to be holy in body and soul because God is absolutely holy. God said, "You be holy, as I am holy." He explained that sinners need a blood sacrifice and believers need a high priest. In the New Testament times, Jesus Christ offered His own blood as a sacrifice for our sins and became our high priest forever. In Leviticus chapter 10, Nadab and Abihu, two of Aaron's sons who were priests, made an offering to God. But they offered strange fire. This was not the fire God demanded they use, but a different fire that they desired to use instead. All of a sudden, fire came from God and killed them. This was God's way of warning all mankind that they must obey Him, even on what they consider to be little things. God said, "Those who come before me must honor me and glorify me before all the people." Moses told Aaron and his family, "You must not act sad over their deaths. Drink no strong drink so that you can think clearly." God gives rules dealing with sin and obedience between Himself and man. The first sin that happened in each age was punished by death. Adam and Eve died spiritually when they sinned. Nadab and Abihu died under the law of Moses. In the New Testament, under the law of Christ, Ananias and Sapphira were put to death. God numbers the warriors. Numbers 1 through 11. In this book, the men of war were numbered, counted, so that the Israelites would be ready for battle. The men of war totaled 603,550. Next, they were organized into armies, with each tribe given a specific marching order and specific camping spot. They started on their march from Sinai to Canaan. They marched in an orderly manner, with the pieces of the tabernacle carried before them by the priest. When they camped, they always camped in the same position with respect to the other tribes. This way, people did not become lost among the millions of Israelites. This is a special picture. God's people are numbered, and everyone is considered important. They were gathered about God himself, for he was present in the camp. The 12 tribes guarded the tabernacle of God. The priest camped around the tabernacle court. Moses, Aaron, and the priest guarded the entrance. Aaron and Miriam challenged Moses. Numbers 12. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman he had married. They said, "Has God indeed spoken only with Moses? Has he not also spoken with us?" God heard them. Now the man Moses was very humble, above all men upon the earth, and probably he would have let this unkindness go. But God himself had chosen Moses to be the leader. God punished any who would not respect proper authority. God called Moses, Aaron, and Miriam to the tabernacle. He came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the door. God said, "To all others I speak in visions and dreams, but to my servant Moses I speak face to face. So why are you not afraid to speak against him?" God's anger came against them, and when the cloud left, Miriam was leprous, as white as snow. Leprosy is an incurable disease that eats away one's skin. Aaron begged Moses to forgive them and pray to God that he might heal her. Moses prayed, "Oh, God, heal her, I pray." God answered, "She will be shamed for 7 days." So Miriam had to remain outside of the camp for 7 days before God healed her. The whole camp was forced to wait because of Miriam's and Aaron's rebellious act. 12 spies in Canaan. Numbers 13 through 14. The Israelites journeyed closer to Canaan, and Moses sent 12 men on ahead to spy out the land. Each man was a tribal leader. They traveled through the land for 40 days. Afterward, they gave a report. 10 men said, "The land is good, but the people living there are giants. We are like grasshoppers to them. We should not go into Canaan because we can't take the land away from those giants. They're too big and strong." But 2 men, Joshua of the tribe of Ephraim and Caleb of the tribe of Judah, gave a good report. They said, "With God's help, we can take the land." The people decided they would have been better off as slaves in Egypt than die fighting for the land of Canaan. So they said, "Let's choose someone else to lead us back to Egypt." Joshua and Caleb said, "The land is good and God is with us. With him on our side, we shouldn't be afraid. Do not rebel against God." Then all the people took up stones to stone them to death, but God's glory appeared in the tabernacle and stopped them. God said to Moses, "How long will these people hate me and not believe in me, even with all the signs I show them?" God was ready to strike them all with a disease and start a new nation with Moses. Moses said, "Then the Egyptians will hear it and say that you brought your people out of Egypt just to kill them. Please forgive the sin of these people." God said, "Because of their unbelief, the people will wander in the wilderness for 40 years, 1 year for each day the spies were in the land, until their generation have all died." The people didn't like to hear that, so they decided they would try to conquer Canaan on their own. Moses told them they would lose because God was no longer with them. That is exactly what happened. Korah's rebellion. Numbers 16 through 17. Korah, of the tribe of Levi, and 250 leaders of the congregation of Israel rose up against Moses and Aaron, saying, "Everyone is holy, so what gives you the right to lead us?" Also, Dathan and Abiram of the tribe of Reuben said, Moses has set himself as a ruler over us. Moses bowed his face to the ground. He said to Korah, Isn't the service God gave you Levites to do in the tabernacle special enough for you? Do you have to be priests also? Take censers and put fire in the censers and incense upon them, and bring them tomorrow before God. God will show you whom he chooses. At the scheduled time, Korah brought the incense, set it before the tabernacle, and returned to his dwelling. Then God said, Everyone not with Korah and the other rebellious leaders must get away from them. God caused the earth to split and swallow Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, and everything they owned. Then the earth closed over them. Next, fire came from God and devoured the 250 men who offered the incense. The people complained, Moses, you killed them! This made God angry, and over 14,000 died before Moses and Aaron could offer incense for the people. To prove Aaron was the only one chosen as his high priest, God had the leader of each tribe put his rod before the tabernacle. Aaron's rod budded, putting forth blossoms and ripe almonds, showing Aaron was God's choice. His rod was placed in the ark along with the pot of manna. It was a sign to remind the people not to rebel and grumble against God, so they would not die. Moses disobeys God. Numbers 20. As the Israelites wandered in the wilderness, they came to Kadesh, where Miriam died and was buried. There was no water there, and the people again complained, saying, Why did you bring us out of Egypt to die in this evil place? It has no seeds or figs or vines, neither is there any water to drink. God told Moses and Aaron, Take the rod and gather the congregation and speak to the rock, and it will pour out water. Moses took the rod and called the group together, and he said to them, Hear now, you rebels! Shall we bring forth water out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock 2 times. Water came pouring out, enough for all the millions of people and animals to drink. God provided the water, but he told Moses and Aaron, You will not lead the Israelites into Canaan, because you did not believe me, to treat me as holy in the sight of the sons of Israel. Later, at Mount Hor, Aaron died, and his garments were put on his son, Eleazar, who became the next high priest. The fiery serpents. Numbers 21. The people became discouraged because of their long wilderness wanderings. They spoke against God and Moses again, so God sent fiery serpents to bite the people. All who were bitten died. The people came to Moses, saying, We have sinned because we have spoken against God and you. Please ask God to take these poisonous snakes away. So Moses prayed, and God said, Make a snake of brass, and put it on a pole. Anyone who is bitten will live, but only if he looks at the brass snake. So Moses made the metal serpent and placed it on a pole. The people who were bitten and then looked at the brass serpent lived. Balaam blesses Israel. Numbers 21 through 24. Israel came close to the borders of the Amorites and asked for permission to pass through their land. Instead, the famous King Sihon led his people against them. He was totally defeated. Then King Og of Bashan went out with his armies and fought against Israel. He also was defeated. When Balak, king of Moab, saw what had happened to the other 2 kings, he became afraid. He knew that a man named Balaam could curse someone, and that person was cursed, or bless someone, and that person was blessed. So King Balak sent messengers and money to Balaam, saying, Come and curse the people of Israel for me, for they are too mighty for me to fight. But God told Balaam not to curse the Israelites, so Balaam sent the messengers back. King Balak tried again. he sent more distinguished leaders and offered more money to Balaam. Balaam said, "There isn't enough money to bring a curse on Israel when God refuses to curse them. I can't do anything against the command of the Lord my God." But Balaam was swayed by the money, so he told the messengers, "Stay the night, just in case God has more to say." God had said no once, but like a demanding kid, Balaam kept asking, hoping God would change his mind. This time God said, "Go, but you shall speak only what I tell you." The next morning Balaam saddled his donkey and went with the men. This angered God, for Balaam knew he should not go and do this wicked thing, and was doing it only because he was greedy for money. An angel stood before Balaam, with his sword drawn in his hand, ready to kill him. Now Balaam could not see the angel, but his donkey could. When the donkey saw the angel, she turned into a field. This made Balaam mad, and he hit the donkey to make her stay on the path. Then the angel stood in a narrow spot in the path, with a wall on each side. The donkey saw the angel and swerved to one side, crushing Balaam's foot against the wall as she passed the angel. So Balaam hit the donkey again. Next, the angel stood in a place so narrow the donkey could not pass. So she stopped and lay down. Angry, Balaam beat her with his staff. Then God used the donkey to speak to Balaam. The donkey said, "What have I done that you've hit me these 3 times?" Balaam replied, "Because you've mocked me. If I had a sword, I'd kill you." The donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey, whom you have ridden all your life? Have I ever done this to you before?" Balaam said, "No." Then God opened Balaam's eyes. When he saw the angel with a sword in his hand, he bowed to the ground. The angel said, "Why have you struck your donkey 3 times? She saw me and turned aside, or I would have killed you and let her live." Balaam said, "If it is displeasing to you, I will go back." It was displeasing to God, but he had the angel say, "Go to King Balak, but you can only speak what I speak to you." King Balak met Balaam, and Balaam said, "Build 7 altars here, and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams." Then God spoke through Balaam, and blessed the people of Israel rather than curse them. This angered Balak, for he was paying Balaam to curse Israel. Balaam had 7 more altars built at the top of Pisgah. Again God spoke through Balaam. God is not a man that he should lie, or the son of man that he should change his mind. He has blessed these people. I, Balaam, cannot reverse it. Balak said to Balaam, "We must be doing this in the wrong spot." So they moved to the top of Mount Peor and built 7 more altars. Then Balaam looked towards the Israelites and said, "Blessed be everyone who blesses you, and cursed be everyone who curses you." Balaam could not curse Israel, but he told Balak how to turn God against them by getting the Israelites to sin. Balak got the Israelites to eat things sacrificed to idols and to do wrong things. 24,000 Israelites died because of this. Joshua chosen, Numbers 27. God told Moses, "Go to the top of Mount Nebo and look over the land I have promised to Israel. You will not live to enter it because you rebelled against me at the waters of Meribah." Moses said, "Who will lead the people so that they will not be like sheep without a shepherd?" God said, "Take Joshua. Lay your hands on him to give him your authority." Moses put his hands on Joshua in front of all the people, so they would be willing to follow him. Joshua would be the next great leader of Israel. He was the one chosen by God to lead them into the promised land. Deuteronomy. Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. Deuteronomy was his fifth and last. Its message is, "You will receive blessings if you obey, but will be cursed if you do not obey." In Deuteronomy, Moses repeated the law that he had written 40 years earlier in the book of Exodus. This gives the book its name, since Deuteronomy means second law. This law was given to a totally new group of people. Only Moses, Joshua, and Caleb remained alive of the people God brought out of Egypt. Their children, a new generation, were ready to enter the promised land, the land of Canaan. It was important that they enter the promised land under the conditions given in the law. Moses knew he would die soon, so he gave the children of Israel his farewell speech. He told them, "Everything in your future depends on your obedience to God. Taking the promised land, your victory over your enemies, how much money you make, and your daily happiness depends upon your obedience to God's commands." Moses said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is God. You shall love the Lord with all your heart, and all your soul, and all your might." These words will be in your mind, and you will teach them often to your children. You will talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you travel along, and when you lie down and rise up. You people have been rebellious against God from the first day, making him angry. When God brings you into the promised land, you will be blessed as long as you follow him. He will bless you and your crops and your animals. But if you go after other gods, then God will punish you. He will remove you from your land and scatter you from one end of the earth to the other. Do not forget this. What does God ask of you? He wants you to respect him, to walk in all his ways, to love and serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep his commandments, which are for your good. Do not add to, nor take away from these laws. Moses had spent the last 40 years of his life delivering the Israelites from slavery in Egypt and guiding them through all the struggles and dangers of their life in the wilderness. His work was now finished. He had given them a system of government from God, laws of freedom and unity, and rules for getting along with their neighbors. The whole system was based on a God of freedom who saved Israel from slavery rather than making them his slaves. Parents were to be honored, human life was valued, personal property was respected, and honesty and truthfulness was for everyone. Moses said, "You are about to cross the Jordan River to go in and take the land which God has given you, and you will own it and live in it. When you go into Canaan, you must not worship the false gods of those nations, nor should you practice witchcraft, nor sorcery, nor call up the dead. For all who do this are an abomination, unclean to God. When you harvest your crops, you are not to go back for a final picking. Leave that food for the widow and orphan to eat. You must not cheat when you buy and sell, and you must act justly." Moses said many more things to them. Then Moses went up to the top of Mount Nebo, opposite Jericho. There God showed him all the land, saying, "This is the land I promised to Abraham." Moses died there, and God buried him. Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not dim, and he was still strong. No prophet had ever been like Moses, whom God knew face to face. In Deuteronomy 19, God said that he would raise up a prophet from among them who was like Moses. They must listen to him, for he would speak all that God commanded him.
second Exodus, third Leviticus, fourth Numbers, and the fifth is Deuteronomy, the last of them all. Let us sing the books of history, of history, of history. Let us sing the books of history. There's 12 books in all. There's Joshua and Judges and the story of Ruth. Then 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings. Then 1st and 2nd Chronicles, which gives us the records. Then Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther the queen. Let us sing the books of poetry, of poetry, of poetry. Let us sing the books of poetry. There's 5 books in all. Job the patient, Psalms of David, and the Proverbs of the wise men, and then Ecclesiastes and the Song of Solomon. Let us sing the major prophets, major prophets, major prophets. Let us sing the major prophets. There's 5 books in all. Isaiah, Jeremiah, who wrote Lamentations. Then Ezekiel and Daniel, who were true to their God. Let us sing the minor prophets, minor prophets, minor prophets. Let us sing the minor prophets. There's 12 books in all. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, and Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi.